welcome today. We've got a great person on our podcast, Biz on Fire, and it's Nick James. Now, I met you, Nick, actually, the first time I met you was at one of your events. You might not remember, it was a Bums on Seats event. So, yeah, you do remember that. And I think it was the first one you held at the time in Birmingham.
Was?
Yes. So just for the audience, our audience and listeners are very, very keen about business, improving their mindset in business, their skill set, anything they can do to get the desired results. So just I think it would be really useful for you to talk into your background and your journey into where you are today.
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure. And as you say, we've known each other for a number of years and spent a bit of time together with you and Steve. So I suppose, we met at one of my events, which was a number of years ago now. I think when you guys were relatively early on in your journey of building your training business. But I've been running businesses since 2008 and been around the kind of personal development, self-improvement, mindset world for a lot longer than that. So I actually, really grew up in that world, that industry. I went to Tony Robbins events when I was 12 years of age because my mum was big into it and she was a trainer for Tony's organization. So I've kind of been around the world that I now operate a couple of businesses in for a very long time, all through my childhood. And so worked for a training company in my late teens, early 20s to learn the ropes and learn about sales and marketing and speaking. Set up my own business in 2008, was effectively a marketing consultant, writing email copy, sales letters, creating marketing materials for business owners. And over the last 12 years, that developed in a relatively short space of time into a training business where I would teach marketing. Now we're 12 years down the line, multi-7-figure business and a secondary business as well that I run with a partner. Again, still training, educating, teaching business owners about sales, marketing, and of course now, more broadly, how to recruit, how to manage teams, how to set up systems, processes, manage the financials, pretty much everything. And we specialize in doing that for people in what I call the expert space. So coaches, consultants, speakers, trainers, authors, anyone that runs a business based on their expertise. And I guess now the thing I'm probably best known for, albeit we're not really doing it right now in 2020, 2021, is our Expert Empires events, which are large scale. We have 500, 600, 700 people a time on average. Our biggest event in 2019, we had 1,400 people there. Those events have become fairly well known, and we fly speakers in from all over the world, people like Grant Cardone, David Goggins, Shalene Johnson, Tom Bilyeu, etc., Gary Vaynerchuk. That's where we are now. And of course, we're not running live events in the way that we normally would in the current climate. So it's been quite an interesting last 10 months. And by the way, I think, you guys probably in a similar position. You've had to change how you do things. But, we had our 2020 was our most profitable year ever in business.
Right. Says a lot, doesn't it? Even though you probably, what was it that you changed then? Obviously we were hit with the whole pandemic, everything, and you can't do the large events that you were doing. What do you think it was that enabled you to have them one of your most profitable years?
I think a few things. The first thing is, like everybody was impacted and affected in some way, some really badly. Some businesses, if you're in hospitality, restaurant, that kind of thing, horrendous, absolute killer for you. Some people, and again, this doesn't get anywhere near the same amount of media coverage. Some businesses have boomed in this pandemic because they were lucky. They just happened to be in the right industry, the right place at the right time. And then, so for me, there's probably 20% of businesses that were, massively impacted negatively by this. There's probably another 20% that by sheer luck have boomed. But then you've got the rest of us in the middle who basically, you make what you can of it. And, I think too many people, I think it's less a business strategy and tactical matter and more a mindset matter, which I know, of course, you and Steve talk about a lot. I go, look, there's a bunch of things that I and our businesses could not do.
Yeah.
But the question is, well, what can you do? So I started looking at, well, there's a whole list of things now that I can't do, like big events being one of them. So let's start making a list of things that I can do. And by the way, there's things that came on that list of things that I can do that I'd either done before and worked really well and I've forgotten.
Yeah.
Because we often do that, don't we? One of the questions I ask all the time in my business and of our clients and the listeners on this podcast is, what have you done before in the past that worked really well and you just forgot to do since? And I bet you've got a list. We all have. I had. I went, what have we done before that worked really well? And we started doing things that we'd done before that worked really well, and we hadn't been doing as much consistently, and that was helpful. And we started looking at new opportunities, things we'd never done before, and started deploying different strategies and tactics. And like I said, ultimately, I honestly believe that today, as I sit here talking with you, Gemma, we're in the best position we've ever been as a business because I've now got a lot more depth of opportunities, strategies that I can deploy as we go forward. Like before, I don't mind saying this, we were fairly one-dimensional in terms of our business model. It was large events, we run a few a year, and that feeds our mastermind, our coaching programs. Like that was the model. But the gift in all this was that I had to find a different way of doing it. And so, who knows what's around the corner in the future, but I look forward to, the day when we can run large events again, of course, as we all do, in our industry at least. But I won't lose sight when that happens. I won't lose sight of the fact that I've got a really good model here that's actually more profitable than how I used to do things. So, combining what we've always done historically that's worked really well with what we've now had to do during this pandemic, without a shadow of a doubt, for me, will mean a far better, bigger, more profitable business, making a bigger difference, helping more people, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, I think that's really important what you said there about not forgetting what actually works, because I think that in business you can become comfortable in a strategy or a certain business model that if you're comfortable, you don't sometimes look at what else can I do, should I do anything else, because you just run with it. And then as things change again, if you went back to your previous business model, I think it's so important to remember that you've got two things now that you can leverage upon and use and actually combined to be even more successful and move forward. Yeah, I think that was a really good point now.
And I think, the other thing, I mentioned this, I've been talking about this a lot recently. I think this crisis, if you want to call it that, like any crisis, I always see that it's a real opportunity for us to develop as individuals and as people. Yeah. And it's a challenge, and we only grow, we only develop, we only really find out what we're made of when we put ourselves under pressure and when we have challenges show up in business and in life. And so, this has been a fairly big challenge for a lot of people. And I think you're now seeing what people are really made of. And for me, in a perverse way, I kind of get excited when I'm challenged by things that make me uncomfortable, that I haven't dealt with before, that I don't know what to do to deal with them, because it causes me to stretch, to grow. And, when I was running the same business model year in, year out, ticking over, and it was working, the truth is I probably wasn't growing as much as I have done over the last year. So, I definitely welcome the challenge. I know that sounds weird, and I know that's not generally, probably not to you, Gemma, of course, we're cut from the same cloth, but I think, for most people, it's weird to hear that, and you don't get this perspective. It's why, I think, creating podcasts, listening to podcasts, putting yourself around people that think differently is so important. I spend a lot of time now listening to great podcasts and audiobooks and getting the opinions of people that think differently to the masses, because the bottom line is, like, if you think like everybody else, you're only going to get the same results as everybody else. And let's face it, if we look at the majority of people, in the UK in particular, in society in general, the overall trend is that people are probably less happy, less fulfilled, have, like in a poorer financial position now than they were a year ago.
Yeah.
And that's because they're all listening to the same message. So find a different message to listen to look at, and you'll probably get different results.
Yeah. So what do you think it is that, do you know, like we said, that you've said there, there's businesses that have flourished and there's businesses that have really struggled with it, and there's businesses in the middle. Some have pivoted and done something else. Some of them have just stood still, not knowing which way to turn. What do you think is the reason that many businesses possibly don't get to the success that they desire? What do you think that might be that thing that possibly holds them back or gets in their way?
Yeah, well, this, for the business owners listening, will not make for comfortable listening, but I genuinely believe it to be true. You, as the business owner, are, without doubt, the greatest asset in your business. You, as the business owner, are, without doubt, potentially the greatest liability in your business. In other words, the business, the trajectory it operates at, the success it achieves or not, is a direct reflection of you. So, if we have a saying in our within our executive team, our leadership team in our business, that all problems are leadership problems. So, like, if we're not happy with how one of our team are performing, it would be easy as a business owner or a leader in the business to point the finger and say that person's not pulling their weight. Yeah. But all problems are leadership problems. So how have we recruited that person, managed that person, led that person to have them think that behavior or that way of showing up is acceptable? Like, we are responsible ultimately. And I think it's taking, the first piece is it's taking that responsibility as the business owner, that, like, bottom line, and it's hard when times are tough to look in the mirror and go, I've created this. But I think you've got to be willing to look in the mirror, regardless of how good or bad it's going. When it's going really well, I think you should look in the mirror and say, well done, I've done a great job. When it's going, but we don't do that enough.
I was going to say that, yeah.
We tend to, and of course, some people probably do it too much. And I think it's healthy to go, actually, you know what, I've done a really good job here, and acknowledgement to everybody else that played a part as well, because you can't do it on your own. When it's going bad, you've also got to look in the mirror and go, right, how have I created this? How am I responsible? What do I need to do different? So that you can lead from the front. And I think the second thing, which sits alongside this, is having the thing that's kept, I think, the number one thing, aside from mindset and knowing that effectively the business is a reflection of me, the second thing is that when the pandemic hit in March last year, and everyone's freaking out, I still had and have laser focus and clarity on the vision, on like where we're heading, what we're all about, why we exist, what our short, mid, long-term goals are, and they don't change. Like, I've maintained through all of this, that is still the vision. How we get there now might be a little bit different in the next 6 to 12 months, but the vision is still the same. The mission that we're on to impact a certain amount of people in our industry and help them grow and flourish and develop their businesses and themselves has not changed, will not change. Yeah. The methodology that we use, the business model we use to get there might change. But I think it's that, I think too many people, as I said, number one, reflection, the business is a reflection of you. So too many people went into negative energy and started to get really fearful and into protection mode. And they probably either didn't have a clear enough vision in the first place, or if they did, they then backtracked on it in the climate. They went, oh, well, in COVID, we can't do that. Yeah. Like I said, what can you do? That's got to be the question. And, even like you've probably got this local to where you live as well, Gemma, like there's restaurants and stuff around where I live that, of course, by law, had to close the doors, put the shutters down, as it were. And they're crossing their fingers, getting the government support they can and hoping for the best. Hope it all blows over before we run out of money. Yeah. There are others who in the same climate, under the same rules and restrictions, went, we've got to close our doors, we've got to put the shutters down. But what can we do? And like there's one in particular restaurant that me and my wife love going to. We take our kids there regularly. That they've started offering like a home delivery service. And it's not a takeaway per se. It's like it's a nice restaurant. And look, I don't know how profitable they are right now. I don't know. Their revenue, of course, is down. I'm sure they've furloughed staff, but they're doing something. And even, by the way, and I suspect, you know, it's better than not doing anything at all. Like they're doing what they can. And actually, like what's cool is locally to where we live, I know people that were not customers of that restaurant that are customers now. And so they've just, you know, they've kind of built their brand, their profile locally. You know, I don't know how profitable it is, but what I do know is as and when they are able to open the doors again, they'll be busier than ever because they stayed front and center of everybody's mind. And, you know, I suspect they made some profit, maybe not as much as usual, but they've managed to keep ticking over. And, you know, it could be, who knows? It might be that restaurants can't open for another 6 months. They've already been closed a lot over the last 6 months, and most can't survive with a year of no business, but, you know, they probably can, given the way they're handling it. So again, I use that example because I know that we're very lucky and fortunate that we're in a business where, you know, moving your offline events, training business online isn't that difficult. Let's face it. You know, when you're running a pub or a restaurant, like the challenges are far greater, but you've always got to ask yourself, well, what can we do?
Absolutely. And going back to that, the businesses, the restaurants that you spoke about, I'm exactly the same. I've started now using restaurants that I have never used before, you know, to have takeouts brought home and things. And with that though, like they've got now an option when things possibly do go back to normal, they can decide we can have the restaurant, and also we know we've got the ability to have this other side to our model as well. So absolutely being able to look at that positive, and
they could easily double their business. I mean, look, this is a fact from, you know, over time. In every crisis in history, there is also the biggest opportunity. If you look, you know, it's a fact that there are more millionaires, and of course, you know, probably in the 2020s that we're in now, being a millionaire is no great shakes, but I guarantee there'll be more billionaires made in this, you know, current crisis and this current climate than ever before. So like there are, and it might be, you know, look, I hate to say it, and it's harsh. It might be that business you spent years, you know, the best years of your life building up, it might be that you do close the doors and start afresh and do something different. That might be necessary. You know, there's only so much you can do if you own a business that cannot open its doors for a long period of time. There's only so much you can do, but we all have the same opportunity. And of course, you know, everyone's at different stages of life and of growing their business, but, you know, we've all got the same opportunities. And you've just got to look at what the best opportunity is for you right now. Yeah. But there are loads right now, more than ever.
So it's a case of just getting lucky and just assessing everything around everybody's businesses, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, what I do know is sitting there feeling sorry for yourself never got anybody anywhere.
That's right. I just want to ask Nick, you know, because you've obviously scaled your business and developed it, what enabled you to scale your business? Because I speak with lots of business owners, entrepreneurs who are wanting to scale their business, but they find it very difficult to get to that position where they aren't the business as such or tied to it 24/7. So how did you manage that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, there's two key factors that allow you to scale: people and processes. That's it, effectively. Because, you know, traditionally, when you're in the early stages, you'll certainly be able to relate to this. You are marketing department, salesperson, customer service, web designer, technician, bookkeeper. You are all of those roles, right? And so where people struggle to scale is because they're doing everything themselves. And the way that you get yourself out of doing everything yourself is via people and or processes. So I think we'll talk about people first. I mentioned earlier about, having clarity of vision, of mission. We've got absolute clarity on where why our business exists, what we stand for, what our values are, what our goals are in terms of growth for the next 4 or 5 years. We've got all of that mapped out. And when you've got all of that mapped out, that becomes a much more attractive proposition for people to get involved in. Otherwise, the job that you're trying to fulfill is just another job. And therefore, people will treat it as such. People are coming in every day for the paycheck, punching the clock, and that's it. And your turnover of people becomes rapid if you're playing that game. So for me, how you attract great people, if we talk about people and processes being the two ways to scale, how you attract great people is having a great vision. Yeah. And I'll repeat what I said earlier. The business is a direct reflection of you. So if you want to attract world-class people into your team, you'd better be showing up yourself at a world-class level. And look, I'm not here to lecture people on lifestyle. We've all made lifestyle choices, I'm sure, that maybe aren't a 10 out of 10 world-class standard, but you've got to show up in great energy. You've got to be mentally and emotionally strong and able to deal with challenges, because people do not want to work for a company or be part of a company that doesn't stretch them, grow them, cause them to improve themselves. And so effectively, you as the business owner, you're setting the standard, and the people in the business cannot grow beyond the standard that you set for them, which is why I'm always have been, always will be so obsessive about personal development and improving myself, because I cannot grow the business at a faster rate than I grow myself.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the first thing on the people side. And you can tell I get excited when I talk about it, because I'm passionate about that. I honestly, as much as I've loved building our client base and building my profile, and as much as I love growing the revenue and the profitability of our business, the thing that gives me the most joy, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is building the team and seeing that, when people work in our team, in our environment, day in, day out, we get to develop them far quicker and more effectively than anybody who, people that listen to my podcast or watch my videos on socials, they're getting, I would hope, great value, but they're not getting as much value as the people that are in here all day, every day. So, that's the bit that I'm most passionate about. I'm better at that than I am at the systems, the processes bit, for sure. But I do think that there's a time and a place and a necessity for processes. Otherwise, if you only focus on the people side, you end up taking on a lot of fixed cost and a lot of expense, and you're not running as efficiently or effectively as you could. So because I'm not naturally strong on the processes side, what did I do? I brought in people that were strong on the processes side to implement. There's things that I traditionally do really well. So I've built a relatively significant training business because I'm really good at marketing, training, events. But I had no process for it. I was just good at it. Yeah. So now what I've got is a marketing team and a couple of people in particular in the marketing team who are great at process, who have now, I suppose, systemized my ability to market training. And now they can do it, and I don't need to be involved in it anymore. Yeah. So I suppose, being also as the business owner, being aware, like, what are your biggest strengths? And in my case, it's definitely people, sales, marketing. I'm really good at that stuff. Then bringing in people that know how to implement processes so that my ability in sales and marketing can be replicated. Yeah. Otherwise, you end up doing it all yourself all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think alongside that, it's a case that I look in my business and my roles, and across our businesses, I've played lots of different roles at different times. Like in the training business, I look at my role as very much the technician, because I do the delivering of that, the training and everything that's involved in the mentorship. But then in some of my other businesses, I'm very much the entrepreneur, as in the strategy, where that's going, the KPIs and everything else involved. What would you say to the listeners about how they're able to kind of let go of certain reins and know what things they need to let go of at the right time, because it can be too easy, can't it? I remember in my very, very early days starting out in business, I would bring people in, but then very quickly sometimes start doing their job for them. You know.
So I think there's there's a couple of things. First of all, I genuinely believe if someone's listening to this and they're going, yeah, I'm doing everything, and they see that as a bad thing, I'd like to flip that and see it as a great thing, because the fact that, Gemma, you've done all of those different roles in the business, I think, first of all, it means that you know what you're looking for and what good looks like and what that job looks like. You know, we've got 4 full-time salespeople in our team who are on the phone all day, every day. I've done that job. Yeah. I know what it is. I know how hard it is. So I think when I lead them, train them, mentor them, and share how they can do better, I'm doing it from a place of experience, not just theoretically. So I think it's a great asset as a business owner to have had that phase where you did it all. I think it means you know what good looks like, and I'd like to think it means you command a certain amount of respect in your team. Then the next bit, then, really, I suppose, was your question, like how do you know what to let go of and when? So there's 2 different angles that I come at this from. The first one is the stuff that you're inherently weak at should be the first thing that you delegate out, because clearly, if, like, for argument's sake, let's say you're listening to this and you're going, like me when I started, brilliant at sales, rubbish at processes, organisation, systems, service of customers. Well, that was where I hired for first, to get somebody to do that. I'm going, it would make no sense for me to hire somebody to do sales if I'm really good at it, and then me do the thing I'm rubbish at. Just doesn't make any sense. So definitely hire for the gaps in your skill set. And then the second thing you need to think about is how much impact each role or task has on the overall success of the business. So, you know, I talk a lot about £10, £100, £1,000 tasks. So a £10 task is something that is low impact, but they're all important. They're all valuable to the business. But the question is how valuable are they to the business in terms of, like, return on time invested? So a £10 task is something that's low return on time invested. £100 task is more return, and a £1,000 task is the highest value tasks in the business. So really, you as the business owner, the name of the game when you start bringing other people into the business is you want to be recruiting for £10 tasks, because A, it costs you less to recruit somebody to do those things, and B, they're less impactful in terms of return on time invested. Therefore, you can afford, this is the hardest bit that I had to get over. And I think, Gemma, you understand, given how you framed the question, you almost have to accept in some areas a drop in standards. And that is hard for someone who's got super high standards, which most business owners, entrepreneurs have. Really hard to accept. Like, I have to accept that my 4 sales guys are not, when they're on the phone, they're not as good as I would be. But they can make 100 phone calls a day each. I can't make 400 phone calls a day, even if I tried. And I definitely can't do 400 phone calls a day and do all the other things that I've got to do in the business, the high value tasks. Yeah. So you almost have to, it's hard to let go of the need for it to be perfect, but that's how you scale. And of course, you know, I do everything within my power to train, manage, develop, support the team so that the standard, let's say the sales team, that they get better and better, and they have, and the standards we have there are now pretty high. But you have to accept that when somebody walks through the door day one, they're probably not going to be as good as you. Now, by the way, there is a flip side to this. There are also things that you're not brilliant at. And by you can bring somebody in who's better than you. And I've got loads of people in my team now who I'm so happy to say are way better than me at their job. Like, they're and that's really the key.
Isn't it?
Well, you want people to come in who are better than you in certain areas, and you also need to accept there are certain areas where you're not going to be able to replace yourself perfectly, and you have to almost accept a reduction in standards, which is really hard to do, but necessary if you're going to scale.
Yeah. What one thing do you wish, looking back, that you'd known when you started out, that you think would have had the biggest impact?
Yeah, I think when I started out, I was thinking too small. I didn't I didn't understand enough about business to know. Like, honestly, when I look back when I first started, I was clueless. I didn't know what to do. You know, I set myself a goal. I want to make this much money, but I didn't know how to do it. I was just literally winging it, making it up as I was going along. I think the thing I wish I'd had more guidance on in the early days was how to strategically plan for growth of a business. I just didn't have any of that. I mean, like I said, to start off with, I managed to do it with, you know, a small amount of understanding, but probably a decent work ethic when it came to sales and marketing. I was just naturally quite good at it, and I'd worked for a company in the same industry in sales and then in marketing, so I knew that, but I didn't know how to grow a business to seven figures, to multi seven figures. I didn't know how, and actually, I think there's a serious lack of education and training in our industry around that subject. It's why I really focus on it massively. Let's face it, you know, the market is pretty much saturated with people teaching marketing and sales stuff.
Yeah.
But because it's sexy and that's what everyone wants to learn. But actually you know, over the last 5 years, we've, you know, probably grown our business tenfold. And I haven't become 10 times better at sales and marketing in that 5-year period. In fact, probably what I've improved on in that 5-year period, the thing I've improved least is my sales and marketing ability. So really that's probably what I wish I'd realized and known. I was so obsessed with learning about sales and marketing, and that did stand me in good stead, and it was definitely helpful. But it you know, because that's all I knew, I was thinking too small. And if I'd have known what I know now about thinking big, long term and strategic vision and planning, and, you know, not just thinking big is often thrown out. People use that statement a lot. You got to think big, and, you know, people like Grant Cardone talk about 10x. You know, that thinking, but what's lacking is then the strategic plan to link the big long term goal to the day-to-day activity now. And I think that for me is the definition of strategy. It's what are we doing here and now today to lead us on a journey to get there in the long term. That's the bit that I didn't know that I wish I knew now.
Yeah. So to get that information, Nick, did you have to go through the whole long journey yourself to find that out? Or did you find a strategy or like lead on a path to kind of get you there? You know, you've talked into personal development and mentoring and things like that.
I think what's funny is if somebody had told me what I've just said in 2008, 2009, I wouldn't have listened.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready to hear it.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I don't need to learn that. I just need to learn how to make some sales and get some inquiries, get some leads. That was all I was interested in. So I wasn't ready to hear it. And it was only because I built the business by winging it, and how we didn't go broke, I have no idea. Like, literally, it is the biggest fluke in history that just by being good at sales and marketing, and I'll be honest, pretty rubbish at everything else, I managed to build what was within a few years a multi-six-figure business. But then it plateaued. We stayed at that level for a couple of years at least, and I was searching for the answer. I was like, I'm learning everything there is to learn about sales and marketing, and like, honestly, I'd have looked at myself then and said, I'm pretty damn good at it. You know, I'd have given myself an 8.5, a 9 out of 10 for that skill set. So I was going, what am I missing here? What am I not seeing here? And that was when I started to be open to the fact that it might be about more than that. And that's when I started to invest time and money in educating and training myself and learning from people that had built big businesses, that basically said, yeah, like, it's not just sales and marketing. It's about far more than that. We talked about people and processes and having the vision and having a way, having a rhythm for how you lead and manage and meet with your team and all that stuff, which, you know, it might not be the sexy stuff, but what I've learned now and what I know is that is the, you know, sales and marketing will get you so far. What will get you to 7 figures and multi 7 figures and scale, given the question you asked before, is that stuff that I've just talked about. So yeah, I definitely had to, I had to do it a little bit on trial and error to start with. And when it got so painful that I realized I couldn't work it out on my own, I then looked for help, and that help enabled me to then, you know, scale the business as we have now.
Yeah, yeah. I like that you mentioned that, because it's a language that I use, that sales and marketing's very sexy. People, you know, want to know that, want to learn it. But there's like key components that you spoke about, which are essential for any business to be able to be sustainable and scalable as well. And I think sometimes it's as a business owner, it's hard for people to sometimes really throw themselves into some of those activities, like processes and systemization. For a lot of people is quite boring, and it takes a lot of energy and a lot of time. But I think that, like you've said there, if you focus your energy on these things, that allows you then to have the right team and things in place that enables your business to grow and goes as big as you want for it to go. But it's the case that I think that mindset shift on, don't just do the things that are going to give you that instant result. It's the whole cultivating the whole business and everything in the background of it.
You've also got to be self-aware enough to know what you're world class at, and then build the business on that basis. So, like, you know, I know that my biggest strength is not systems and processes. My biggest strength always historically was sales and marketing. So focusing there in the first place made sense. And then, of course, bringing other people in that are good at it makes sense. And I've almost had to train myself to, like, we've got a very solid structure now in our business, and we have daily, weekly rituals and habits that we do to make sure the thing keeps working and keeps turning over. And that's not my natural style. I'm, you know, your typical entrepreneur. I've always got a new idea. I'm always looking to do something wild and wacky and interesting and sexy and fun to keep me interested. And so I've had to kind of retrain myself to go, this is what's going to make the business stable and successful long term. And then how can I allow myself to do an amount of exciting new projects, so that, you know, I don't lose the love for it? Because if you end up running a business you hate, you've failed, in my opinion, regardless of how successful on paper it is. So it's about, I've had to look at my own natural style and pattern of behavior and go, right, what do I need to do to make this successful, and how do I couple that together with what I want to do to meet my own needs?
Yeah, no, I think that's really important, to be able to take that awareness of yourself and understand that some things that we have to also manage ourselves, even though it's our business, we have to be mindful of how we show up in that business and the decisions we make, because it can take it completely off on a different tangent. Massive.
Always, 100%.
Yeah. So what, on your journey, what would you say, there might be a few bits here that you can comment on instead of just one particular part of it, but what was the best piece of advice anybody has ever given you?
Good question. I think there's one that stands out more than any other, but then there are a load of others that I can draw on as well. So in like 2016, I'd got a fairly, you know, good sense of the business model, and it was working, and we were making good money. And I had a meeting with Gary Vaynerchuk, who I'm sure, Gemma, you've heard of, and the listeners, many will have, and some might not have heard of Gary. And I was fortunate, I won't tell you the whole story, but I was fortunate to basically get this opportunity to have a one-to-one meeting with him. And my outcome for that one-to-one meeting was that I would get Gary to come and speak at one of my events. And because, of course, Gary was speaking, we'd attract a load of people to come to that event, and therefore we could, break all our records in terms of revenues and profits for a single event. That was the plan. And the advice that Gary gave me basically was, looking at our market, our industry as a whole, it had become really saturated in 2016 with very similar type of events. And so, there was so many people in that market doing the same thing. It was getting more and more difficult. And basically he was like, look, what you're doing might work okay now in the short term, but trust me, in a few years' time, this industry will be dead. It will be on its knees. And if you switch your approach now, you'll get first mover advantage. And of course, none of us could have predicted how right that was, because that industry literally has been wiped out through 2020. So, but yeah, basically, his advice was to stop doing large-scale sales-heavy events and really focus on building a community around our events. That means that when people come, they pay a decent chunk of money to come to the event. Therefore, they get great value, great training. We don't need to make a load of sales from the stage at the events. And he went, look, if you do this, you'll probably make less money in the next year, but more in the next 10 than you ever dreamed possible. And he was absolutely spot on and right, apart from one thing. So he was right because, I suppose, in theory, the strategy he gave me was a long-term play. It was like, look, you're going to probably focus less on revenue and sales now in the short term. You're going to focus on building community and goodwill, which is a long-term play. And he was like, look, you'll make less money in the next year, probably, but more in the next 10 than you ever dreamed possible. And he was absolutely right. The only thing he was wrong about was we still made more in the next year. Even though our focus changed to not be on sales and revenue and far more on building the community and the goodwill, it actually worked faster than I could have expected, could have imagined. So it was a big turning point for me in the business, to really switch our focus. Because again, my strength had always been sales and marketing, so I was focusing there. But I think switching the focus on building the community and building a brand, a movement that people were connected to, associated with, wanted to be part of, was the best decision I ever made.
Yeah, great. Oh, absolutely. And I think sometimes, for me, I know I'll always have mentors. I'll always be, personal growth. I always have those people who have already travelled the path further ahead of me, because I think that you can sometimes be too much in your business that you can't, see the picture for being in the frame.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think, look, I and you, we both mentor business owners and give them strategic advice on how we think they should grow and what they should be doing now. But just because that's what we do doesn't mean we don't need that ourselves. In fact, I would argue that because that's what you do means you need it more than anybody else. So the reason I'm a member of a couple of different mastermind groups, and I have a coach, a mentor of my own, that I work with on my business, I think that's more necessary, because otherwise I can get very stuck in only my way of doing things and my way of thinking. So I think having external perspective is always important. The other reason is, I think you've got to practice what you preach. And, if I'm out there, as I am, telling people how important it is to invest in your education, training, developing yourself individually as a person, on, getting training on how to grow your business and being part of a mastermind group, a peer group of people that are going to hold you to a high standard. If I'm there saying that, well, I should be doing it myself, surely. Otherwise, I'm not congruent with the message. So yeah, that's the reason why I always have, since a very young age, invested heavily time and money in my development, and that's what my business does. So I'd be a fraud if I didn't, quite frankly. And I think there are people out there doing that, and you've got to be wary. The first question I'd ask anyone, if they're a business coach, I would ask them who their business coach is.
Yeah.
And if they can't answer that question, I would never hire that business coach.
Walk the walk, isn't it?
Exactly.
Absolutely. So just a couple more things. One of them would be, for anybody right now in business who might be feeling the pressures, you know, the wind knocked out the sails type of thing, you know, they're coming against lots of barriers and challenges, what piece of advice would you give them to just get themselves back into that space that they need to be in?
Yeah, my advice would be, it's never as good or as bad as you think it is in the moment. So like, I can remember times in my career where I was at like rock bottom, and in the moment it felt like the end of the world. And a month or two later, I'd forgotten that it had even happened.
Yeah.
I can also remember times in my life and times in my business where I was on cloud nine, literally like hit a big goal, you know, me and my team are celebrating. It's amazing. It's like, you know, we have made it. And a month or two later, I've completely forgotten about that as well. So it's never as, I think you should absolutely celebrate your successes. I'm a big advocate of that. But know that that success, you know, that won't last forever. And on the flip side, you know, I'm aware that, you know, I've definitely had bigger challenges in the last 12 months than I've probably ever had in my business career. But again, you know, they pass relatively quickly. If you, of course, you know, what we said right at the start, you know, you go, well, there's a bunch of things I can't do right now. What can I do? And yeah, no matter how high the highs or no matter how lows the lows, they're never as good or as bad as you really think. In the moment, they feel significant, but in time it passes. We've got very short memories, really, in the huge scheme of things. So, and I think actually remembering that is quite important.
No, absolutely. And for me, with that, even though something could seem really, really bad at that current situation, for me, I always look and go, what can I take from this right now? And what can I learn from this that I don't do it again, or it allows me to leverage to become better at that thing that I wasn't good at?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. No, I just want to say thank you, Nick, for sharing with us today and the audience. I really appreciate it. So anybody listening, could you please just tell them where they can connect with you, find out a little bit more about you? That'd be great.
Yeah, well, for sure. Well, again, thanks very much for having me on. I always appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts with people's communities. So I would appreciate that. Yeah, best place to connect with me. You can go to, if you want to find out more about what we do, just go to our main website, which is expertempires.com. Or aside from that, probably the best platform to connect with me on would be Facebook. So just search for Nick James or type in Expert Empires into the search, and you'll find my Facebook group, my page, my profile, that kind of stuff. And you can DM me on Facebook, or indeed, if it's easier, DM me on Instagram. I'm at Nick James Events on Instagram. So yeah, and again, if you message me on either of those platforms, that comes direct to me, I'll reply. If you email in through the website, it won't come to me.
Right. So get direct to Nick. Yeah, no, thank you, Nick. Some absolute great nuggets there shared and advice to help people grow their business, scale it, and get the most of what they desire. So once again, thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
No, very welcome. Thank you. Take care.